overall, I think pressure on politicians is good. If the important thing is that it, from my perspective, that the good faith, like what is the agenda in pressuring the politicians? And at the end of the day,
YouTube views isn't sufficient.
well, it's not even just YouTube views. I mean, but put that aside for a moment. Like, but there is that is always an incentive, I think, for everybody on this platform, for some maybe more than others, but we all respond to that on some level. Like nobody likes to be,
and that's also why she responded, by the way. Let's just be very clear.
Right. Right.
He wouldn't have responded if he had 1,000 YouTube followers.
Correct. And, but I think, what's becoming clear, and what is clear with Jimmy Dore in particular, is that this is not about pressuring politicians to do something. This is not about a long-term strategy to empower the most progressive forces in the Democratic Party to get real change. This is about him trying to prove, and it's an easy thing to do, at least in terms of what his requirements for proof are, him trying to prove that they're all frauds and that really the only true person out there is him.
Or the guy who took Assad money.
Well,
awesome. Sorry. He accepted money.
It's Tulsi. It's Tulsi today, but it was Jill Stein before. Right. Like, he's not out there like trying to re-recruit Jill Stein. He's like, and I'll remind you, in 2016, it was Elizabeth Warren. I mean, go back and look at that interview that I did with him. He was saying the plan was Donald Trump is going to get elected and then we're going to get Elizabeth Warren. And so it is whomever in that moment is not the person who's in a position to do something and to make any type of change, granted incremental, but yes, politicians are not going to do revolutionary change in that regard. They can't. Like, our system is not such that they can.
And there's a resentment towards Ocasio-Cortez for engaging in politics that isn't strictly class reductionist politics, where she'll talk about issues of sexism and issues of racism that I don't think are the politics that Dore chooses to engage in. What he cares most about is AOC owning Pelosi, like owns, rips into, that kind of stuff, which isn't about building power.
Well, he was attacking her, like I say, before she came into office. In 2018, in 2018, when just during the general election, she was asked a question by, I think it was Chris Cuomo or somebody on CNN, like, should Andrew Cuomo be the governor? And she was like, in the general election, yeah, people should go out and vote for Andrew Cuomo.
And she called AOC Mama Bear one time, so that must mean she's completely sold out.
And also we did a video on that because I've just seen this because people have like posted it now. And I will say that like at the time we were like, you know what, you want Cuomo in there instead of a Republican because we could get you could make it harder for him to veto things as opposed to a Republican would just come out and do it. We have no IDC now.
But they're all the same, man. Right. And that's the politics that he wants to engage in. I know where to go from there, though.
But go ahead, Naomi. With that.
It's interesting. I think this is about something actually bigger. So there's the Jimmy Dore issue, which is fueled by anything from having an agenda, clickbait, and really like making left commentary, frankly, cheap because it's not nuanced and it's not sophisticated and it's not like he has a background in political theory or organizing or frankly any politics. It is literally
he just doesn't read. He doesn't read anything except he thinks, honestly, I mean, that's what it comes down to.
It's emotion.
You don't need to have any of that background. You can just go and read. There's a lot of stuff you can read online 100%. And educate yourself.
So there's one thing just and the people, frankly, who echo it, I'm disappointed in, not because we don't all agree that we should pressure, as Sirotto's take is, pressure certain lawmakers to push Medicare for all forward. what happens power structure wise, and this is what my concern right now is, we don't have actual movement leaders out there, like real movement directing the left. And so what happens is he's sucking up that void, like he's taking over that void and preying on people's vulnerabilities right now. People are angry and they're concerned and they don't know where to channel their energy, partly because institutions have been dismantled on the left. Unions are very weak. And it's hard to get into the nuance because so many of us have not been in the halls of Congress and in power. So it's hard for us to navigate how power structures work. So he's actually preying on people, and people who are encouraging his behavior and echoing it, with all due respect, might be playing the same game. And we might agree with him on 85% of the issues, but this is a clickbait game. This is about fame. There are hosts on air who want to make change. I think all of us are really concerned about educating our audience and bringing on informed people to help us understand everything, issues and how to move through and push for these change. And then there are hosts who want to be multimillionaires and famous. And, let's just make those lines very clear. Yeah. So and not to mention, he has taken money admitted to taking money from pro-Assadist groups. So he's not the pure guy that he wants to pretend. And I like Jimmy.
He has a problem with those pro-Assad groups, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think
neither did Tulsi.
But that's the problem. He can't sit here taking money from anybody that's not your audience means you're technically not pure, right? It's just he can't use a set of standards for you, Sam, for taking, Harry's razor money or whoever you promoted today. I was off air. I didn't see. Double that down. Versus
Blinkist. Get it right.
Blinkist. But aside from that, I think the other thing that we have to be concerned about is, okay, so how do we affect change? How do we get Medicare for all on the table? Embarrassing rather than pressuring, because he wasn't pressuring. He was embarrassing.
Well, that's my point.
Squad.
That, look, I think that there is, on some level, I've always been thinking about this a lot. Like, on some level, I'm like, I think there is value in his making a racket to a certain extent, because I think there is an element where, let's say the squad or whomever we're talking about in terms of progressives, I think it's good for them to feel the pressure. I think it's also good for the leadership to see that they're getting pressure from their people, because on some level, right, these are their constituencies, and politicians know, if your constituencies are starting to act up, you're going to come to me for an ask, and that means I'm going to have to deliver because these people's backs are against the wall. So I think that to a certain extent, I haven't sort of weighed in on the whole Twitter thing so much on Twitter itself, because I also think I think this is,
because you have 1 million people following you. That's why, because you can just go on air and make the argument.
Well, no, but I'll make the argument here. But I think that it's in some weird way, Twitter is in some ways more public in some ways than the show here, because the show is limited. There'll be maybe 70, 80, 100,000 people who watch the show. But on Twitter, it can go to journalists who then create the conventional wisdom more. And so, I think that's, I don't have a problem, but again, I think it's in bad faith. And I think it's a problem if people fall down the road. I want to play just this segment from Katie Halper's show, because here is the way Dore reacts to any type of nuance here. And look, in the original semi-endorsement I had of his idea, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I don't know if asking for a vote on Medicare for all is really the thing you want to ask for. There may be other things like committee, like functional things, right? Like things that actually do something. Like
$1,200 immediately, like a relief package for people who are getting evicted. Let's talk about the priority of needs.
I'm talking more about
that Sorota's laying out.
That Sorota's laying out, but I also think that just are more like things that start to build your structural power. If you're talking about leveraging a vote to give power to Nancy Pelosi, it's okay, let's get some committee, let's get rid of, this is a big ask. It's not going to happen. Seniority with committee chairs, for instance, or something that creates, it's give me some farmland so I can start to grow stuff. Give me some structural things.
As opposed to a blowtorch or something like that. And I know we're going to get to the Katie Halper clip.
Here's a clip where Stoller who is very thoughtful about these things, and his politics are, put aside the ideological, parts of his politics. He really does focus on, the movement building and the structural things about the Democratic Party. And he's not as, he's not as jaded about the Democratic Party. He just sees it as like a vehicle. There are some Democrats that he thinks are good. I think we're similar in that respect. But he sees like there is a complete absence of any type of like sort of governing philosophy or even legislative philosophy of the Democrats. And
he doesn't get angry about it, though. He just accepts it. He's like, this is what we're dealing with. And once you're able to realize how this is structured, institutions treat its creatures.
He's not making his living as a guy who sells himself as knowing nothing about anything, but is going to espouse on everything and then make money on it, which incidentally is exactly what Limbaugh used to do. I'm just an entertainer. I'm not doing anything. But here is that Katie Halper segment with who's on there? Stoller, Brianna, and Gray, and Jimmy Dore.
And like they are asking for things. But I think, and they're getting things. They're getting some representation on committees. It's insider.
Fuck off. Fuck you. Fuck off. Go fuck yourself with your fucking committee, fuckface. You fucking egghead nerd. I don't give a fuck about your committee shit. Nobody voted for her for a fucking committee. Why don't you stop saying that stupid shit?
Now pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. I want to, this isn't as long of a clip as we should be playing, but understand, we'll go back to it, but yeah, Dore likes he likes Stoller. This is him. This is like a sort of a road comic-y thing to do, like where you get like, you sort of, I'm not really bullying you, but I'm going to bully you type of thing, but whatever. I mean, I
think he's trying to bully him.
Well, he is to a certain extent, but what happens is Jimmy gets nervous when there's any type of nuance or anything that is like, it's not even intellectual. Like, he's not talking theory here. He's just talking about like, hey, this actually is not, nobody has a magic wand. Like, you need to have power to exercise power.
When we're engaging in politics, that's when he gets nervous. When it's not just emotion and vitriol, that's when he gets nervous. Right. When you actually have to make tough decisions on how things are going to happen. And again, a Medicare for all vote. I was more in your camp, Sam, before this when I thought about it, that's one good thing to leverage. But I don't even think it is a good thing to leverage. We already know the over 100 co-sponsors on the Medicare for all bill. We know that from last year. It's not going to have change this time around. It's going to fail. And that could hurt Medicare for all going forward. It's infinitely more important to leverage those committee chairships because he doesn't understand how politics works. That would change things, like Richie Neal being the chair of Ways and Means. That's a massive impediment to progressive change, but he is not interested in understanding that. And what Naomi said earlier, I think, is really important. The fact that he is preying on people and their hurt and their emotion and lack of representation in democratic leadership and making them basically nihilists and misleading them into thinking that Ocasio-Cortez, one of like the 4 people fighting for us, is the problem. That's who you should direct your anger to. Potentially because she's a woman. I mean, I get that vibe. I really do. And I know that Francesca Fiorentini faced ridiculously insane sexist attacks from him in DMs and stuff.
Oh, well, this guy,
like, that's where it is. Clear. That's where it resides.
Jimmy pretends like I don't exist, but it took about 4 seconds before he would respond to Jamie's tweet. Yep. I mean, let's face it. I mean, let's be clear here. I don't know if Jimmy's criticism is a function of misogyny. I just know that when that he loves to go after women, and when it comes to actually having a conversation with someone who is very similarly situated to him, we both came from comedy. We both are old. And
went to law school.
Like literally at one point, I ran into him at I don't know, Netroots. We had the same suit, the exact same suit that I got at Gentleman's Warehouse over here. I mean, that's how similarly situated we are. But for whatever reason, he's a little nervous about engaging me with this, but let's play this whole clip because I think I want people to have the context. It's not just Jimmy doing this, but understand he is ignoring the reality. And then you need to ask yourself why. Like what is he doing? The idea that you would attack AOC in this way. Like, it's one thing, like, look, I've seen critiques of AOC from people who are, full on socialists or communists. And they say, yeah, of course, like she is part of the capitalist mechanism. And ultimately her what she is espousing is fundamentally a maintenance of the capitalist system. And even if it is making it a, reforming aspects of it, and even if she has a capitalist critique, et cetera, that's perfectly legitimate. People have different ideas of what politics should be. But in terms of her functioning within the context of a system that I can assure you, Jimmy Dore does not have a problem with capital accumulation.
Exactly. Thank you. That's it.
Functioning within the context of that and working for the people that supposedly Jimmy Dore is out there fighting for, she's the last person that you want to disempower. It's one thing to pressure, but you don't want to disempower because that's it, folks. The rest of it is just sitting around and masturbating, with all due respect. But let's play this whole segment just so that we can be, represent it fairly.
Supposed to extract something for your vote. Whatever it is, you're supposed to extract. Guess who did that last time? The Blue Dogs. Guess who won't do it this time? The Progressives.
So this is I tweeted positively about your campaign because I like that you're saying they need to ask for things. And one of the things AOC responded to me and said, actually, we have asked for things, and we're not being public with what we're asking for. But
it's a secret. It's a secret what they're asking for. That's a real.
But it's not. I mean, I know some of the. I mean, AOC is not the lead negotiator. That would be Pramila Jayapal. And like they are asking for things. But I think, and they're getting things. They're getting some representation on committees. It's insider.
Fuck off. Fuck you. Fuck off. Go fuck yourself with your fucking committee, fuckface. You fucking egghead nerd. I don't give a fuck about your committee shit. Nobody voted for her for a fucking committee. Why don't you stop saying that stupid shit?
No.
That's directed at Matt, not at Jayapal.
Fucking Matt.
I have a point here.
Yeah, you fucking bet you do. It's called a Poindexter. That's a fucking stupid thing to say.
Okay. The point.
So funny, guys.
A space of healing. And
I had a point, and then I forgot it.
I feel that I can say this because I love Matt, and he's valuable, and he knows that.
Yeah, we just got to knock him upside the head a little bit.
And I hope he knows I'm saying this all with
you get to yell at me too.
I hope he understands I mean this all with a comedic undertone.
No, I get it. I think really
in other words, I don't have a real those material benefits that are going to build power. I don't have a real response to it, and it undercuts my entire argument. So I'm going to respond comedically in such a way that I shout over you and throw you off. I mean, look, I can tell you this. One thing Jay Moore used to do, just sort of reminds me of Jay Moore. You ever watch any segment with Jay Moore, like particularly one like those interstitial shows? If there's a guy who's on there with him, I can guarantee you a significant portion of those times he's punched that person in the nuts or grabbed them in the nuts right before they go on air. That's, this is what you do to create some dominance.
That's it. When you're being interviewed, I mean, I had that thing with Katie last week and the same thing happened. She just came at me and I was like, what is the strategy here when we wanted to get into details? But Sam, I mean, I just got so repulsed from that, not from the style, but from the point we are in society right now, with the crisis that we're facing, with the mass evictions that are on the line in a week and a half, with people who are completely out of money, and the left, he is picking fights with left leaders and saying that he's being strategic. This is the most unstrategic, dangerous thing you can do. Most unstrategic, dangerous thing you can do at this moment. And that was repulsive. That was an offensive in the entire show, frankly. Like, if you want to have Matt Stoller on, let him talk. Let him make his argument. Don't have a bunch of comedians on to come up with some better strategy.
No, he's a comedian only when he wants to escape the
responsibility for what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what he doesn't know. All right, well, let's play the rest of that segment.
Sorry.
What you're saying, so what the progressives are asking for are some insider procedural stuff. And I think the reason is that they have not decided that they are a coherent bloc that wants to do anything.
You're right about that.
That's basically what I'm saying. Is they're loyal soldier Democrats. Put AOC aside, because AOC was one of the few to actually sort of say, maybe CARES Act wasn't such a great idea. And she did stop the
after she voted for it.
Well, so she also stopped the HQ2 hack. The point here is, I think the issue is that progressive Democrats are loyal. Like, it's not clear to me that there's anything in the progressive world that is different than just your loyal soldier Democrat. And that's, I think, the core of it. It's like, you have to define what you want. And I don't see a coherent definition of what people want, where their values are. So
is it possible to make that? Is it possible to make that critique? Because I think that it's perfectly fair, and I agree with you and Jimmy in your frustration with the fact that they're not going far enough, and they're not.
But that's not the critique.
Wait, hold on. Let Bree.
But I also think it is overly simplistic to pretend that they are identical. That there is no difference between them and mainstream Democrats. And I think it would be an easier conversation for a lot of people to absorb and to agree with you if we said a little bit more.
Here's what's fascinating. Bree is arguing that there are Democrats who are to the left of mainstream Democrats who are trying to push it. Like, she's arguing that there's a substantive difference between an AOC and, let's say like a Richie Neal. And Jimmy doesn't even get, he's so bad at listening. He doesn't even get that she's arguing against his proposition that they're all the same.
He's busy eating. I am.
He's having a sandwich.
I'm super hungry now,
But Stolar's point, I think, is true. And I want to get your take on this, Nomi. I think Stolar's point is true insofar as I don't think the progressive, and he goes on to talk about this, like, we've seen some changes in the progressive caucus just in the past week, where Jay Apollo is now, they don't have dual leadership. Ilhan Omar is now sort of, I guess, the whip, and Katie Porter has been brought in number 2 in the progressive, and they put out a statement. It's a very nebulous statement. We're making it more member oriented, right? Which I take to mean, and we know the criticism, AOC came on this program and said, the progressive caucus doesn't necessarily have the requirements that we would like to say. You don't just get this title by paying $4,000 dues. You got to actually have, there has to be an ideological, basically, hurdle for you to cross, essentially, to get the label. And my sense is they're starting to work on that. And I think that is a necessary step before you get to, we want X, Y, and Z, both from a structural procedure standpoint and then from a programmatic standpoint. And that's what we're going for. And this is our 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan to achieve these goals. And I think he's right. We don't have that articulation. And partly because, Nomi, like what you say, that there isn't a movement leader or movement leaders or even institutions that are doing that. Like, we're seeing it a little bit with some of the electoral institutions, maybe.
This is the key. This is the key.